In London's West End and just north of the legendary Savile Row, you'll find the Masons' Arms. Originally built in 1721, it's been a popular destination for the cutters that have helped establish the row for generations. It's also long been the meeting place for the 39 Club. My name's Mark Webster, and on behalf of the 39 Club, I'm in conversation with documentary filmmaker, Monomedia Films' Mark Baxter, who 5 years ago gave us A Modernist, which is the story of one of London's most celebrated gents outfitters, John Simon's. So, Mark, I suppose the best place to start with this is, when did you first become aware of John Simon's as a man who sold clothes?
It would have been in the early 80s, probably 82. I started worked in Fleet Street in the print industry, and I've never forgotten, I saw a guy wearing a double-breasted Prince of Wales suit, but on his feet he had these shoes that I don't think I've ever seen before, which I've subsequently found out were called Baswegians, but I didn't know that. So I literally went and said, "Excuse me, mate, where'd you get your shoes?" And he said, "We all go to John's."
Right.
But he never said John Simon's or where that was, just said, "We all go to John's." And I thought, I've got to find this place, John's. I have no idea what it is. So, and then a couple of 3 weeks later, I'm wandering around Covent Garden, and I saw those shoes in the window of the shop, and it had J. Simon's, and I'm guessing the J was for John. So
sure.
that's how I found it. Walking in there was quite daunting because these guys, at the time I'm 20 or 21, these guys that are in there are all like in their late 40s, 50s. And I'm thinking, I knew nothing about what this look was. I just loved the styling of it all, which obviously now I know as Ivy League and that remnants of the modernist suede sort of look. But I didn't know that at the time. I grew up in that. I grew up in the sort of 60s and 70s and had uncles who loved that mod clothing, but I didn't really understand too much about it. I got into the mod revival myself later, but the detailing on the clothes in that window were just remarkable.
What you'd have been, of course, is the latest version of the young man who's discovered that look, because, of course, as you went on to discover, particularly, I guess, through the film, it's kind of been a kind of return business, isn't it? It's not just the same people who bought the clothes in 1960, it's brought in new generations all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, just walking in there, it was just overwhelming because they had so much knowledge, and there was clothes that I've not seen anywhere else.
Yeah.
I've been involved with the mod revival 79, 80, 81, but it didn't look like that. It never looked like that. It looked like those black and white badger shoes and a bit tacky and not that great. And I very quickly went backwards anyway. I didn't like the mod revival sound, the music wasn't really my thing. So I was going back quite quickly, so the influences I was getting from it, so Small Faces, The Who, and then the soul stuff, Otis Redding, etc. I was going backwards quite quickly. And the shop was playing, as you walked in, they were playing Miles Davis.
Oh, so it gave you a soundtrack to the clothes.
And you're sort of thinking, what is this place? You know, it's like some sort of Mr. Ben type place. It was pretty weird. There was old vintage bits in there, a bit of pottery, art on the walls. There's jazz playing, and there's these fantastic well stretcher full of shoes. And it all made some sort of sense, but I didn't know why.
Well, and I guess that's where the joy of the film is, because it makes sense because it's kind of one man's head, one man's imagination. So we'll talk about that in more detail shortly, but let's talk about then how you got to that stage of getting to meet him to make a film.
Yeah, well, I got to know quite well then, early mid-80s. I was in there all the time, spent all my wages, a lot of my wages in there. I got to know him quite well, and Kenny and Jeff, who worked there with him, and young Paul, his son Paul, who now runs the business. So I got to know him a little bit, and it was great to know that. And then I drifted away. I started doing other things and lost my job in the print and wasn't around that area so much. And then I, if you like, reinvented what I do, whether that might be. And then I started doing a bit of social media. I got a phone call one day from Paul Simon saying we're looking for someone to do, social media, and we're now established in Chiltern Street, or just off Baker Street. So I didn't know that, and I went down there, and the shop was almost the same shop.
Wow!
But it was now in a very fashionable part of the West End, but quite a quiet back.
Probably worth noting as well is that I guess he kind of got in there. It's very well known Chiltern Street now, isn't it? Yeah. But he's almost he was one of the catalysts that got the place going, wasn't it? Because it's kind of out of the way, isn't it?
He seems to be done that over the years by going by when when we did the film. He was in Richmond in the early 60s. Soho selling clothes when it wasn't really like that in Soho, really.
No.
Carnaby Street, yes, but Soho itself, it was in Beak Street. And then Covent Garden in the early 80s, when that was just coming out of being a fruit and veg market. The only other shop I can remember being there was Paul Smith. So Paul Smith also identified as a really good shopping area.
Yeah.
So John, he always had a good eye for things, I think. It's fair to say that, obviously.
Totally.
And he ends up in Chiltern Street when it was just a very quiet backwater, and now it's Chiltern Street, and everyone knows the Chiltern Firehouse and all that sort of thing. But he apparently had his eye on that shop there for many years. And
Wow.
he was just waiting for to reinvent the shop as an online business, obviously with a retail space as well. But he'd said the lease run out in Covent Garden. I think it was 95. I think it had run out, and he just had a couple of years off. But John being John, I think John's just always an old schmutter trader. He's never going to be able to stop.
He was probably switched on the day after the shop shut. He's wondering about where's next.
I mean, even now he's 83, I believe, and he's still out there nearly every day doing the charity shops and vintage fairs and trying to find clothes. He cannot turn it off.
When did you? So you get involved with him in terms of social media.
Yeah.
When did you? Because at this stage, had you made your first film as Monomedia Films at that stage?
Yeah, we had made a film based on Tubby Hayes, who's a UK jazz saxophonist, and that was going to be the only film we made because it was so expensive, and I didn't know what I was doing. I'd met Lee Cogswell, and me and Lee had just done the one film, but we got on really well, and we thought we could do more here, but didn't know what to do really. And then by working at the shop, I heard there had been an attempt to make a film on John previously by a guy called Jason Jules, who we all know. And Jason had started the process, and then, as he found out, it's very expensive, and it ran out of money quite quickly, and it had been shelved. And then John, I think I might have given John a copy of the film. I can't really remember. He said, "Well, someone was making a film on me, and maybe you should do that." And I thought that'd be a great gig to pick up on. But Jason had previously interviewed, Paul Weller and John Egerty, Sir John Egerty, Paul Smith. It started the process. But a lot of the footage was unusable for one reason or another. So we had to go back and start all that again. It was quite a big job to go back and ask those guys again to recontribute the stories.
Well, what's important is that level of interviewee did come back in again because he'd, over the decades, established this kind of following, hadn't he, amongst the great and the good?
He was described as the Godfather on more than one occasion. He was literally, these guys have come through as Saturday boys, really, in their various eras and genres and generations. John was always known as a guy that was, his shops were always interesting shops. And the windows were always interesting. It was a sort of destination sort of place to be. And then they spun off of that. Paul Smith says in the film, he bought loads of clothes down there. He didn't need any clothes, but he couldn't resist John's windows. And he couldn't. John, when you go into a John, you go out to buy an overcoat, you come out with 14 pair of trousers and a pair of shoes.
That you didn't even know you wanted, and you didn't.
Resistance is a futile gesture. It will not. He's a seller. Yeah. And I identified that. I've done a bit of that in my time, and I identified that in him. But his knowledge. Then when we started making the film, then I started realising the Covent Garden shop in the 80s started making sense. Art, furniture, architecture.
Right, tell me about that, because obviously what you'd have discovered, and people, they should watch the film because you get the full arc of this. And as I say, 5 years down the line, and it's still relevant
still
because it's still there.
Yeah.
Is what did you get an idea of where the kind of light bulb moment for him went on that turned him into this guy that become this kind of dynamic force of selling gents' clothes, albeit from the strangest places in terms of a London audience?
Yeah, I mean, he just seems to be that perfect post-war kid, born in 1940. Time he hits the teenage years, he's early 50s. He's just so curious. He's out in the West End. He's in Soho. He's seeing Italian waiters wearing clothes they brought over from Italy. You can't buy this stuff anywhere. He's clocking it all. He starts to design his own versions of that and selling his own versions of that in the Petticoat Lane from 1955.
Really?
He's 15. He sets up a stall there at age 15, and he's making and he's designing and his influence is always like companies like Burberry and Aquascutum. you know, the local bloke down the corner. He was actually aiming at brand names then.
At a time when those names wouldn't have associated themselves with, let's call it
level.
street look or,
not that level,
style.
Yeah, not that level.
All, no.
But he would say he would copy a Burberry coat or be inspired by a Burberry coat, but he'd make it in pink corduroy,
right,
with a button-down collar, and you're thinking, wow. But the market, obviously, quite a small market for that. But the guys that who wanted that stuff, the very early modernists to become the mods later on, they found someone. They gone, wow, look, this kid's got his own take on it all, and his eye is fantastic. So his influences, which seem to be, you know, American films, American music, which is like the Blue Note, the classic Blue Note series. He was inspired by that look on those films and on those album covers, and he's somehow adapted that to Acne.
Well, they were getting a taste of the Beat generation when they came in my shop. They weren't going to get that anywhere else. Even the old Beats were wearing grey shoes by then.
It's not just clothes, it's not just art, it's not just literature, it's not just music, it's not just architecture, it's not just food. It really is everything.
He sees the big picture of modernism and the role that clothes played in all of that.
His references coming from jazz and everything that was inspiring him, he was able to translate into the clothing.
The reason that the mod look is destined to come back is because it's the only youth culture uniform that doesn't look ridiculous in retrospect.
You know, you're not just putting on a shirt, you're putting on an attitude.
You know, fashion is one thing, taste is another thing. And the clothes that Jay Simon sells are 20 times better than any passing fad that I've seen before or since.
It was kind of like a revelation, really, to find a shop like that, you know, to find all that kind of American clothing that we really liked and the Ivy League style.
If there's anyone in the industry who understands the significance of clothes, then it's John Simons.
What they were doing in America was just buying this stuff without thinking. What he did is he went over and said, that bit's great, that bit's great, that bit's great. I'll take that out, I'll put it into a British context, and suddenly you see it differently.
I don't think it was about being ahead of his customers or in tune with his customers. I think he's an artist.
John unquestionably just knows his stuff inside out. He's the Godfather. Simple as that.
So you talk about the fact that he was smart enough to see things he liked and kind of do his own spin on them. Did he also go to source? Did he shop in the States?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about it, he sets a shop up in 62, 63 in Mare Street in Hackney, underneath the Hackney Empire. And that does well. And the local, let's call them Herberts, find the shop, and they love the shop. And John liked a bit of that, but he also wanted to take it somewhere else. So he ends up, his next move, which is really interesting, he ends up in Richmond, which is a long way from Hackney.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the district line for people who don't live in London.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
but
it can be done.
In the 60s, that's a long way to go. Yes. And then he sets up in there, he sets up the Ivy shop, and that attracts a different type of customer. And within a couple of years, he's established and he's getting some great feedback and lots of customers. And then he goes to New York in 1966, as you say, goes to the source. And he ends up buying shed loads of shirts from the Empire State Building. He just wandered in. Apparently, where'd you buy shirts? Wholesale, in there. There's floors and floors in the Empire State Building. Yeah, Empire State Building.
Right, so he didn't have to kind of shop like we would, which is wander the streets and basically go to a retailer and say, I'll have a dozen of those. Yeah, I mean, he went wholesale, yeah? Yeah,
no, he would have gone, I presume, because I've done a bit when I had a shop years ago, you would go to a shop and say, where'd you get your gear? And they ain't going to tell you.
No.
They're never going to tell you. So he's obviously wandering around and somehow he'd found out in the Empire State Building. And the great thing he pulled off was when he walks in there and they go, yeah, what do you want, this season's or last season? And he said last season in London was not last season. It's never been seen.
No season.
So they were like 50 cents a shirt. They were like no money. So he bought absolute shed loads of them, shipped them back home. Of course, it goes gangbusters back in London because these guys had never seen these shirts. The College Club, the classic American Ivy League shirts, they'd never seen them. He's now got them. Of course, he then starts getting them copied and adapted over in London. His own fabrics, his own ideas and different designs and different takes and all. So he's often running on something else. And he was always picking up on the source material. But as he said, he went to New York and it was all about the art and architecture, and he was like a kid in a sweet shop.
So absorbed everything.
The whole thing that influenced him in the first place was in front of him, and he was in the middle of it, and he had a wonderful time.
I suppose the kind of perfect example of this, the archetypal version of this, is what became known as the Harrington jacket.
Yeah.
Here.
The classic, yeah.
Which, if you went to the States and said, got any Harrington jackets, they wouldn't understand what you're going on about. So tell us about the genesis of that, because that's so much fun.
Well, it's an English company, a Manchester company, and somehow I think he did better business in the States. He was like this like
Coles to Newcastle.
Yeah, literally Sinatra, McQueen, and Elvis Presley wearing a jacket. It was quite a big jacket. It ends up on a TV program called Peyton Place, worn by Ryan O'Neill, whose character's name was Patrick Harrington, I think. And John then gets it was called the G9, the classic Harrington jacket is called the G9. He gets the G9 in the Ivy shop in Richmond, puts it in the window, and he called it the Rodney Harrington jacket. And over the course of a few months, it becomes the Harrington jacket.
Yeah.
The Rodney bit gets dropped. So it was basically a G9 Barracuda, but it became known as the Harrington jacket from then on. And John is the source of that.
Wow. Which, I mean, by the way, if you're counting back, staple diet, skinhead jacket,
everything,
but also that later generation of mod. It just keeps returning.
It's been there forever, isn't it? Yeah. And again, that label. He said we had Barracuda raincoats, and he would then, he knew the labels to. I mean, it wasn't cheap. I mean, the stuff in the shop wasn't cheap, but these guys were just lapping it up, and they're like skinheads and first generation original skinheads. And then suede heads, and the suede heads were the interesting ones. They were like the cross between, coming out of skin and a bit more sort of stylish and a bit more street. They were lapping it up, blazers and cottage ties and button-down shoes and Oxford brogues and whatever. And that look was very, very strong. And John was probably much the only place you could get that in the UK.
Did it remain during those years? Obviously, because we'll talk about the contemporary thing shortly, but did it remain on top of everything? I can only imagine for 1 second that he is a details man.
Yeah. Well, someone describes him in the film, John Eggert, he calls him a curator more than a seller. I think that's really, again, when I heard that, I thought that's perfectly put, because he could have filled that shop with all sorts of stuff, but he wasn't doing that. He was picking that and that and that and that, putting it together as a look, and then suggesting you would like that look. He wasn't saying you had to wear it, but he was suggesting you were walking going, the influence was incredible. You end up coming out with an outfit because that's what he did. And I think you got to know him a little bit over the years. I think he was always moving forward. So he would establish a shop, cut to 3-4 years, and then he was looking for a different clientele or taking it to a different place or stocking different stuff. So he moves out of Richmond and goes into Soho, the heart of the West End, and he opens the Squire shop in Brewer Street. And that he said that the sort of young executives and advertising people would come in there and they would check out what he got. And he got quite a kick out of that because, again, different people, a different class of people, but also he continued to sell that stuff. And then he says it all started going a bit hairy and flary. That's his phrase. It all got a bit like early to mid 70s. It all got.
I can understand how he might have just looked like a little bit of a dusty old.
Yeah, he would have looked a bit dated by
relic.
Then. And then, as Sugg says on the film, they want to look like Kevin Keegan very quickly. And then John just took a backward step. And then I think he carried on doing what he did.
Waiting for style to come back.
Exactly. And I think that's what happened. Everyone got so fed up with the Bloussons and the Barnetts and the mad nonsense. Let's go back to something sensible. He reopens in Covent Garden in 1982 in Russell Street. And it all goes, off it goes again. And we all, I mean, I then turn up and I've come from, I'm obviously a different generation, but I pick up on it. But loads of people picked up on it. It was a real... The band at the time for me were the Style Council, and that look was very much that sort of new neo-mod look. European, American influences, and John was just the perfect place for that.
Well, you mentioned, you saw a pair of shoes, they're called Bass Weasels, you didn't know that, but you learned that eventually. Are there other names that you can think of that come through the kind of John Simons ranks? They're probably all kind of almost household names to us now, if you like, smart gents' clothes, but probably were very obscure when he found them.
Yeah, I mean, the brands that I remember, I mean, I was I love shoes, and there was the Sebagos and the Paraboots, and it also had classic English styles like Lokes and Alfred Sargent in there as well. But then obviously the American shirts, they had names we never heard of.
Yeah.
But the styling was absolutely incredible. I found out later, a lot of those labels were actually John's labels.
Oh, really?
He basically designed the shirt.
He's pulled the wool over our
Instead
eyes.
of putting John Simons in it like he does now, he
Yeah.
put in like, you know, the Esquire shirt. But it was John's label. But that's one of mine. Well, I only found it out by I wore an old shirt that somehow still fitted me, God knows how, to the new shop, and he went, that's one of mine. He knew straight away that's one of mine. That's I can't remember the name of the brand, but he knew the brand it was. Wow. So he was picking up on the styles, and he had them made in the UK. But yeah, he also sold Barracuda. He also sold Burberry. He would go vintage. He'd buy a lot of vintage stuff. When vintage was, it was more second. People knew it was second-hand clothing or dead man's clothing. He would call it vintage, and he was picking up some very nice.
Well, even to this day, I know if you follow him on social media or whatever, there'll be hanging there this old tweed jacket that looks like it's had probably 2 lives. And probably looks as good as it's ever looked in its entire life. And he's bought, this is a one-off.
Yeah, no, it's a one-off coat. He's picked up at a fair or a vintage shop or probably even a second-hand shop or even a charity shop. Who knows? Right. But he's just got that eye where he goes and picks things up. But he's got some fantastic bits and pieces. And he also buys almost to order. He knows that you're looking for you're a certain size and you're looking for a certain thing. And once he knows you're going to come back on a regular basis, he'll say, "Oh, I've got something."
There's a phone call saying, "I've got the coat just for you."
And and he's done that quite a lot over the years, I think.
Brilliant. 5 years on, I know what you're funny enough. Before we started talking, you and Lee, who's on the other side of the camera, said, "Oh, we must go and look at our film again," which is an interesting take because. Was he in Chiltern Street when the film came out? He was in the new shop? Yeah. You've stayed close with him. Have you noticed much change within John Simon's world in that time? I know, not least of which, of course, he's kind of gone a bit more hands-off.
Yeah. I mean, he's 83, which is, I mean, and I think he got to the stage where he realised that it was now an online business, really. Most of their trade will be website-based. And I think that's not John. He's in the trenches. You know, he wants to be in the shop. He's moving things all around quite a lot, and he would be a lot more one-off pieces in the shop. Whereas nowadays, people are looking for a certain style. I mean, the shop now sells a lot of French Vetra and J. Kedge jackets are no longer available, but they have that classic sort of slack jacket, a bit like what you got on yourself. They started that 5-10 years ago, and it's now everywhere. They sell a lot of Japanese denim, which I think John's really probably not got an angle on as much as his son Paul, who runs the business on a daily basis with a guy called Sean O'Byrne. They run it on a daily basis. They're constantly looking for new stuff. They go to trade shows around the world and they pick up. It's always in the
stuff
style
to fit. That's what I mean.
Yeah,
It fits the ethos.
It's in the style.
The ethos.
It doesn't go too far away from what John has always sold, but it is an updated version of it. And he's physically probably had to take a backward step. He's 83, he's done his bit. But I know for a fact, I speak on the phone quite a lot, he still takes an interest. He'll still pop in the shop once a fortnight and rearrange stuff very quickly. But I mean, he's a fascinating guy. And I still think he wants more credit. He thinks he should get more credit for what he did. But I think the people as you said earlier in the film, one phone call, we're there. No one mentioned money, we're there. Where we've made plenty of films, and that isn't always the case.
That's right.
It's a battle to get anyone to turn up for anything, and there's some big names in that film, and like Kevin Rowland, Suggs, Weller, Sir John Egerton, Paul Smith, Dylan Jones, like that. Like in a heartbeat. Yeah, I'll do that, no problem. And they're busy people. They're very busy people. They did it twice. Actually, they did the first version and the second.
Came back again for a bit
which
more.
is almost incredible.
And what's crucial from what you've said there as well, because again. It's clear, even if you can't get in the town or if you can only get to town rarely, you can see it online. Yeah. Is the shop, like it always has been, remains a destination? You still got to go there, haven't you? It's not just a matter of saying, I need a shirt, I'll go online, I'll buy it. It's the experience is still a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I'll say I do the social media for them on occasions, and you do get quite a lot of guys saying, I'm booking a week in London, I'm doing, Trafalgar Square, there's apartment, John Simon's, taking the show in and having some
the
food.
Classics.
But literally, their trip will be based around at least getting in there and seeing what's in there, hearing a bit of good music, having a chat. Also, they're made welcome. There's no one rushing you. It's not like that. It's not like it's got an old school vibe in there. take your time, have a look round, make sure you buy something, then you can go. But yeah, that is very much a destination, I think, and it's one of the very few. It just stands out like that. There's very few shops like that, and very few selling what they sell, and also put it together. I mean, they put it together very well. The curation, of which I've learned over the years, didn't realise that as a younger man. I now get that, and also get all the accoutrements in the shop, the art and the music as well. Yeah.
Well, and it's all available if you want to find out the full backstory on A Modernist.
A Modernist.
Mark, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, sir.